thank you for joining this Advance CTE webinar, CTE and School Reopening Lessons Learned. This session is one of many in a new series of Advance CTE webinars called For Each State, For Each Learner, CTEWorks. This series serves to support you in learning more about the cutting edge and innovative work we're seeing related to CTE across the country. This session is being recorded and will be shared on the Advance CTE website for your reference. To see the topics of or register for future webinars, you can visit careertech.org/webinars. If you have questions at any time, we do encourage you to submit them via the Q&A box on your screen. You are also welcome to contribute to the conversation by typing into the chat box like I've seen many of you do already. With that, let's go ahead and get started. My name is Dan Hinderliter, the Policy Associate for Advance CTE and moderator for today's panel. And I don't think it can be overstated, we are experiencing unprecedented times. In the spring, we witnessed, felt, and pushed through significant disruption to the end of the school year as the COVID-19 pandemic caused the shutdown of in-person instruction nationwide. 6 months later, schools across the country have begun to reopen in a variety of formats. And there seem to be as many formats as there are schools to implement them. This panel seeks to highlight the path that state and local administrators took to get to sharing guidance on CTE and school reopening in the wake of COVID-19, including determining practitioner needs in the spring, the development process of reopening guidance, and implementation of reopening. Each of our panelists today will share some lessons they learned through their work and provide some advice and takeaways to state and local leaders. At the end, we will have about 15 minutes to ask questions of our panelists, and as I mentioned, you can submit questions at any time by typing them into the Q&A box. Before I introduce our panelists, I do want to remind you that our website has a host of COVID-19 related resources, including a repository of school reopening plans and an analysis of their CTE content, as well as a toolkit for prioritizing CTE through and beyond COVID-19. These resources can be found at careertech.org/COVID-19. Now to our panelists. First, we are going to hear from Dr. Maryjo, Associate Professor of Educational Leadership and Workforce Education and the Francis Tuttle Endowed Chair in Workforce and Adult Education at Oklahoma State University, who will share research regarding the needs of CTE practitioners prior to and during school reopening. Then we will hear from Amy Cox, the Director of Career Readiness and Workforce Partnerships at the New York State Education Department, to learn about the process of developing a school reopening plan and the opportunities and challenges thereof. And finally, we have Dr. Marcie Mack, State Director of Oklahoma's Department of Career and Technology Education, who will share lessons learned from reopening implementation and support through the reopening process. I thank them all for their time and appreciate all of them being here. And without further ado, I want to turn to Dr. Maryjo to share first some of the preliminary research she and her team were able to collect about the needs of practitioners surrounding reopening. I'm going to share my screen, and then Dr. Self, you can take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thankful to be here and getting to present and recognizing our research group, which is listed on the next slide. You'll see all the different partners from across the country that are working on this mega, it would be the best word, research project that we've started. Next. The work actually began by my Idaho colleagues, and I want to be sure and give them a thumbs up today because they got us organized and got us moving forward. Okay, next. We're going to look at the why, how, what, and when, and where of our research. And again, as Dan mentioned, just the preliminary findings as we have just now closed data collection. I know some of our team is online today. They were going to be on the webinar, and so they'll be glad to answer questions as well as we move forward. You know, really, for those of us as researchers, we really do want to do meaningful studies in higher ed that would impact what's happening in classrooms and what's happening with our teachers. And so you'll see these listed, the questions that we ask, the purpose of our study. Okay, next. Because we know it's hands-on, right? We know our field is hands-on, contextual, experiential learning. The only problem with this picture, Dan, is no one has a mask on, and to take it with that. But we know what our field is long stood for, being hands-on instruction, and how difficult it is to move that to a virtual format. Next. We used Qualtrics platform. Many of you are probably familiar with that. We followed Dillman's survey research method that has to do with how many times you follow up with participants to get responses. And we also utilized many ways to get participants, one of which was all of you, Advance CTE and the state directors. Next. We did a survey first, had a little over 5,000 responses. We have a Qualtrics survey of about 37 questions. I will be glad to send that to Dan, and he can post if he'd like on the Advance CTE website. Now, out of that 5,084 respondents, some of those are going to be unusable. People started the survey but didn't finish, but still an excellent response rate. You know, in survey research, if you can get about 10%, you count yourself good. And so we really felt good about the number we got. We're now in the second phase. We have part of our group doing the quantitative analysis. The other part of the group is doing qualitative. At the end of the initial survey, they had an opportunity to tell us if they would like to participate in follow-up research. And there were about 237 that said they would like to. So we'll be doing focus groups, individual interviews, and then asking a group of them to respond to a monthly prompt over the next 18 months. And the purpose of that last item is to see how things shift as we go along. Next. Our initial virtual meeting was mid-spring. We got started pretty quickly after the pandemic hit. We worked late spring and early summer and piloted and developed and then piloted the survey. And as you can see, we plan to continue it over the next 18 months or so. Next. So you can see here the responses that we got per state. This is not all of the states, but we took our top ones and have portrayed that for you on the chart. And again, remember that part of these will ultimately not be able to use because the survey was not complete, but still we feel like we've gotten a great response. I would like to add we have had at least 1 or 2 responses from every single state, and we're really proud of that. Even though in some of the states we'd like to have more than 2, we still feel like we at least got someone to respond from each of the states. Okay, next, Dan. We have a wide diversity of content areas represented. And so those of you, if you've done any research or participated in graduate programs, which I know many of you have, you know how important it is to have a wide sample. We have a very wide sample. And in the parentheses behind each of the career clusters, you will see how many people we've had that responded to the survey. So if you look down the list, you'll see our FactSet, our Family and Consumer Sciences group responded most frequently, but still we have good representation throughout. We also have 312 respondents that weren't sure where they fit, which was kind of interesting. And I think that also indicates the multidisciplinary nature of our work and how many of them see themselves crossing across normal divisions that we might have. Next. So some of the early findings, and I was, as I thought about the presentation this afternoon, I thought many of you may go, well, I knew that. That wasn't anything new. You didn't have to do research to find that out. But really what we're wanting to see is what are these challenges? What do they look like, et cetera. So one of the early findings we'll look at is the challenges that they faced. And then according to the teachers' perceptions, what challenges did they see students facing? And then lastly, what assistance did they feel like was needed to be successful? Next. So here's the actual question. The following are some of the challenging aspects that can occur when instruction is moved to a distance learning environment, and we asked them to rank those. So it had a drag and drop function in Qualtrics, allowed them to rank the very top one as most important, and then do their listing all the way on out. Next. Now you'll see 2 columns of numbers, and the first column of number is their first choice, and that also tells you that it underneath the table. It's in the darker blue. And then if it was listed as a second choice, it's in the lighter blue, bluish gray. Probably isn't any surprise to anyone that replicating the classroom or lab environment in a virtual environment was number one by far. But the second one is one I think that we would do good to heed, and that is inexperienced teaching online, that they felt like they were inept at being able to do that, wasn't sure how to do that. And we have even written in comments where they experienced a lot of frustration with that. How do I do this? And in many cases, they felt like they hadn't been prepared to do that. Next slide. So basically the top 6, again, probably no big surprise. The first one, replicating the lab and classroom environment online. Secondly, inexperienced teaching online. We plan to probe that one a lot more as we move forward. How much experience did they have teaching, period, when they started, much less online. And so I think we see some real gaps when we start looking at that picture. Engaging students as remote learners. How do I engage somebody that is just a headshot, if you will, on a virtual screen? I mean, how do we engage? Many of them experience difficulty with reliable internet connection, software, and equipment. Probably, again, not a surprise to anyone. And then the last two, I think, really speak to the nature of our teachers and the fact that they care deeply about their work and that they felt like they just couldn't deliver it in a meaningful, impactful way. They felt like they were delivering content, but they just really weren't sure they were, quote, getting through. Were they really making the impact that they might normally? And then lastly, that students were not as responsive as they might have hoped. Next. Then we ask them, okay, put yourself in your student's shoes, or what are you seeing from the student perspective? So again, these are teachers answering for students. These are not students answering, but rather teachers answering. And you'll see their choices, same type of situation with the drag and drop kind of mode so that they can list as what is most important. Next. So you'll see that their first one was motivation to guide and manage their own learning. Find this interesting because they themselves recognized the very thing that the teachers are feeling it on the other side, right? They're feeling like they're not engaged. And then the teachers indicate that they are seeing that in their students as well. And then you'll see, again, access to reliable internet connection. We think about our urban areas perhaps having better connection, but we have many, many parts of our country is extremely rural. And what does that mean if I'm in a very rural area? Do I have reliable internet? Next slide, please. So the top two, again, these are challenges for students as perceived by the teachers. The first one was motivation to guide and manage their own learning. We took students from a here I am as your instructor in front of you. I'm going to help you and manage your learning and guide you through it to we're expecting you to do that as a student. And that was a very different situation for our students. And then again, their access to reliable internet connections. Next. Now, moving into assistance needs. Number one was across the board, very high, incorporating appropriate accommodations for students with special needs. Interestingly, that was very high on our survey. I've seen some surveys and some work with teachers overall, not just CTE teachers, and it's also one of the top ones. So we don't know what to do with these usual IEP section 504 type accommodations that we normally do. Now we're virtual. What does that mean? Secondly, it's facilitating peer interaction. And lastly, having dynamic discussions. And so I think you'll see in the assistance that the teachers are needing and requesting the very thing that we would hope all of our teachers would want. Making sure all students are engaged, making sure there's lots of interaction and there's strong discussions going back and forth. Next. Now this is a word cloud to show you, we ask them in one word, tell us what's it like to teach during the pandemic? And those are their responses. Now, Dan promised me he would get the moderator hook out if we went over time, so I was trying to go quickly. So you want to do questions at the end, right, Dan?
Yeah, we can save questions for the end. That was really, really, enlightening, and I think it'll be really interesting to see some of those longer, more longitudinal full responses as you proceed through that second phase of your research, especially to see how people kind of adjust and are a little bit more flexible as we get more and more comfortable with this virtual environment that so many of us continue to exist in. So.
Yes.
Maryjo, thank you so much for sharing some of that research. If there is, final results that people would like to see, what would be the best way for them to get those results from you?
I think probably the easiest would be that, Dan, I'll have you post my email on the Advance CTE website, and I'm just representing the group today, so I want to be sure that I've said that several times because I think I drew the short straw. But I have a fantastic group of researchers to work with, and it's really been a joy to work across the country. And overwhelmingly, I'm struck by the fact we have awesome teachers in CTE that clearly want to do a good job, that clearly want to feel like they've engaged with their students and that they're doing that in a meaningful and impactful way. So that was very affirming professionally to see that. So I'll get that information to Dan, and then you can contact me. As I mentioned when I started, these are just our early findings. We just closed data collection. So we will continue to work our mega data that we have.
Well, again, I appreciate you giving us the sneak peek here.
You got the sneak peek. The
exactly.
Spoiler alert. And that spoiler alert is what we call that.
All right. Well, next we will hear from Amy Cox, who will hopefully show us how she was able to take some of those early impressions from teachers and practitioners and put them into a state reopening plan itself. So Amy, I will share our screen and then we should be good to rock and roll.
All right, great. So thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank Advance CTE for the opportunity to discuss our reopening plan. When New York schools closed abruptly in March, our department was confronted with a myriad of questions about how to help schools, teachers, students, and families move forward with and complete the 1920 school year. And as we worked to answer those questions, the uncertainties surrounding COVID-19 forced us to confront the unknowns about the 2021 school year and pushed us to begin planning for the reopening. Next slide. Our department began by planning 4 virtual regional meetings to bring together stakeholders from across the state, including administrators, educators, students, parents, professional organizations, and representatives for and members of special populations. We wanted to examine what these stakeholders felt school would look like in an in-person, a remote, or a hybrid setting, and how different elements of education would be impacted. On each meeting, there were 11 breakout rooms covering the topics of our guidance, which included health and safety, social emotional well-being, facilities, special education, staffing, technology and connectivity, transportation, bilingual education, budget and finance, family and student engagement, nutrition, and teaching and learning. And while each of these elements intersects with CTE, we focused on teaching and learning by ensuring that our department's CTE team members and CTE stakeholders from the field were placed in the breakout rooms dedicated to teaching and learning. All participants were asked to consider the following questions. Question 1, what do you think are the greatest challenges that schools will face under an in-person, remote, or hybrid model? Question 2, can you provide us with concrete examples of creative solutions to challenging problems that could work in your school or district under each of the 3 models? And question 3, can you tell us how the regents or the department can help eliminate any of the institutional, budgetary, or regulatory obstacles that stand in the way of your success? These discussions focused on stakeholders' experiences from the spring and were very informative, especially as they brought attention to challenges particular to specific regions of the state and specific populations. They also provided examples of creative solutions. Simultaneously, our CTE Technical Assistance Center was conducting Zoom meetings for CTE teachers and administrators based on career clusters as a means to bring teachers from across the state together to share the challenges specific to their content areas, as well as offer support and solutions to common problems. These have been so successful that our center is continuing to offer these throughout this fall and next spring. And I don't think we can underestimate the value of these opportunities for educators to share their experiences and ideas with one another. Finally, while the regional meetings and Zoom meetings were occurring, our CTE team at the department was holding daily meetings to sift through feedback as well as research, including reviews of what other states were doing and how that work may be applicable to our work. And I'd like to tip my hat to our colleagues from across the country, particularly Oklahoma, California, Nebraska, and New Jersey, as their reopening guidance, which preceded ours, helped shape our approach. Next slide, please. In reviewing the feedback and the many concerns from our CTE stakeholders, we began to outline our guidance by first asking the following questions. What is the goal with this guidance? Are we providing important points of conversation and consideration for local level planning and decisions? Are we providing best practices and models for CTE instruction? Or are we providing resources for various methods of instruction within the different career clusters? New York is a local control state, so we have to be mindful of the fact that the decision-making does lie at the district level. We also asked who is our audience for the guidance and how can we format it to meet their needs? What, if any, regulations can be waived? How do we continue to focus on quality of instruction, particularly within time requirements or restrictions presented by remote or hybrid learning? How do we remove barriers from learning opportunities and focus on equity? And what liability issues on equipment, tools, materials going home need to be considered in terms of safety? As I just explained to my colleagues and co-presenters, we've come up, our culinary programs have been asking us, we can't really send home the knives with the kids, can we? And that's a no. We then focused on our guiding principles at the department. First and foremost, the health, safety, and well-being of the children and adults is paramount. Educational equity will be at the forefront of decision-making, recognizing that one size will not fit all in a state like New York or in any state. It's important to give districts appropriate leeway to develop creative solutions to their unique challenges. We want to encourage districts to work directly with parents, teachers, administrators, and their local communities to develop and deliver workable solutions to their unique needs and succeed through a collective effort. And we wanted to promote the understanding that planning for schools to reopen wouldn't be a one-time event. The Board of Regents and the department maintain that we would continuously monitor the situation and provide updated guidance, policies, and regulatory changes as the situation requires. Keeping in mind that New York is a local control state, we then looked at what can we at the department control and what can we remove, where can we remove barriers? So we looked at our learning standards, our middle level mandate, our components of a NYSET approved CTE program, work-based learning and the hours necessary for credit under our registered work-based learning programs, and the deadlines for submission of materials for program approval, for Perkins funding, for our civil rights compliance reviews, etc. Our guidance also needed to consider the three possible reopening models, in-person, remote, or hybrid. Our deadline to produce this guidance was July 15th, but our governor was not announcing if schools would be allowed to reopen for in-person instruction until early August. So we knew that whatever guidance we provided needed to direct districts to consider all three models and how to implement their programs within each. Again, student and educator health and safety was the first priority. So in any in-person or hybrid learning needed to follow the New York State Department of Health's health and safety guidelines. As important and of equal consideration was how to shift to remote learning. So we started our guidance with directing the field to consider how they would modify learning for social distancing and or remote learning. Next slide, please. Excuse me. This brought us to our two biggest challenges, the hands-on instruction and learning and work-based learning. With social distancing requirements and possible remote-only instruction and learning, We asked the field to consider options such as identifying those activities that must take place in a classroom and those that can be completed independently. Determining what students need to complete all learning activities and how to provide access to necessary materials, providing individualized student to-go kits without the knives to enable students to pivot to remote learning if necessary, utilizing online platforms when teaching in person to build practice among students in the event that districts may need to switch to remote learning, creating instructor videos demonstrating skills or teaching content for use both in and outside of the classroom, live streaming video of what is taking place inside the classroom in the event some students are at home, and considering opportunities for instructors to operate portable video cameras during lessons. For example, when an instructor is providing laboratory demonstration, he or she can display to students in their seats instead of standing closely watching the demonstration. Work-based learning presented just as great a challenge as our business and industry partners were grappling with closures, reduced staffing, and new restrictions on allowing non-employees on site. Additionally, many of our districts were not comfortable sending students to work sites, even if partners were allowing students. Again, local decision-making would dictate opportunities available to students, but we wanted to provide options and flexibility. Prior to COVID-19, our team had intended to convene a work-based learning advisory panel to define high-quality work-based learning opportunities, as New York chose that as our Perkins quality indicator. This work has been pushed back until 2021, but we were able to use this group to complete a survey to guide the use of remote or virtual work-based learning, which had not been an option for any of our credit-bearing registered programs prior to the pandemic. Additionally, we're asking programs to prioritize those students needing work-based learning hours for graduation credit when offering on-site opportunities. For those programs which require a minimum number of work-based learning hours, we're asking schools to provide comprehensive and thorough work-based learning experiences that meet the needs of students. However, we are allowing schools to exercise discretion if a student is not able to meet the minimum hour requirement set for the program or credential being sought. Unfortunately, for areas like health sciences, we're not able to waive clinical hours mandated by the Department of Health. Finally, we wanted to emphasize maintaining partnerships with business and industry throughout the pandemic by asking them to continue having business and community participation in advisory council meetings, utilizing video conferencing if necessary, incorporating industry partners into virtual student interactions, student career development, and instruction to the extent possible. We're also aware that the nature of work has changed and many employers will be shifting to remote working beyond the length of the pandemic. So we are emphasizing the value of students learning how to work remotely as a skill set of work-based learning. Next slide, please. As CTE was part of the department's larger overall reopening guidance, it was a race against deadlines to compile our guidance and incorporate it into a larger document produced by the department. P.S. When you're trying to incorporate documents from 60 different authors into one large document, it can be very trying. When the guidance was issued and posted on July 15th, our office, our CTE office, followed with an email notification to all of our liaisons in the field with a link to that guidance. Additionally, we worked with our Technical Assistance Center to begin compiling resources and offering professional development around virtual instruction and learning. In order to monitor questions specific to reopening guidance, the department created a dedicated email box for questions, which are directed to the appropriate offices within the department. Our CTE office continues to work with the field to update them on resources and best practices through email and our Technical Assistance Center Zoom calls. Next slide, please. Overall, I think the lessons we learned in plan construction and development are: one, constantly review the work of others, including other states, organizations like Advance CTE, ACTE, professional organizations, etc. There's no sense in reinventing the wheel. Number two, collaborate with colleagues across the country and state. Meetings like today's webinar and the recent DQI meetings have been extraordinarily helpful to me and my team. Number 3, engage the educators who are actually implementing their district's reopening plans to find out what's working and what is not. Our Technical Assistance Center Zoom calls have provided a great platform for our teachers to communicate with one another and share those ideas. Number 4, review and identify any and all flexibilities that can be allowed. Our office is currently reviewing all of our resource materials and regulations to identify changes that will best help teachers and students. And maybe most importantly is staying connected to our teachers and leaders to provide support and guidance. The majority of my team of 10 people, myself included, have been with the department for a year or less, and we have learned that the field has historically felt very disconnected from our department. We are now working much more closely with our professional organizations, our CTSOs, and other stakeholders to ensure they know that we view them as partners in our work. By doing so, challenges like reopening schools in the midst of a pandemic feel less daunting because we all know we're in this together and we'll do what's best for our CTE students. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to take them at the end, I guess. I didn't, Dan, I didn't want to get the.
No, you are perfectly within time. And Amy, I really appreciate all of that, great information. It sounds like you had some long nights and some long weeks putting these reopening plans together. One thing that I took away from, both Maryjo's presentation as well as yours is just how important that collaborative spirit is, especially now. Just sharing of experiences, sharing of resources, just making sure that everyone feels, so connected. I also thought it was interesting that you, viewed remote learning and virtual learning as a skill set to be learned. And I think that's something that we've all developed over the past 6 months, but it's interesting that you really, considered that and incorporated that as part of your plan. So
absolutely.
Really interesting information. And, if there are questions for Amy, certainly everyone can put those in the Q&A box that can be found at the bottom of your screen. But next we will hear from Dr. Marcie Mack, State CTE Director from Oklahoma, who will talk a little bit more about what it's been like to support learners and practitioners throughout the rollout of reopening and what she's learned in the past few months more recently. So Dr. Mack, why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Well, thank you, Dan, and good afternoon, and thank you everyone for spending an hour of your time today with this offering from Advance CTE and open dialogue about reopening plans, and look forward to any questions that you have as we move forward. Some of the pieces that I was asked to talk about, which Dr. Self and Amy have covered, many of the same components that we all have went through. One of the things, what are some of the practices, themes that we were asked about, and one of the pieces is communication is always a factor in any area that you go through, but the piece that we found in communication with what we were doing and making sure that we were keeping updates is making sure we had that timestamp on every communication that we had, because things were changing and evolving each day. We had the opportunity here in March, all of our schools were closed with the opportunity on April the 6th for distance education to start to be offered. So for us, that meant a lot of different things. We have an opportunity not only to offer career and technology education in our K-12 schools, but also at our technology centers, which are secondary and post-secondary, as well as we operate career tech training programs within our skill centers. So in being able to deploy reopening plans with our various facets that we have, we wanted to make sure that we were communicating with all of our stakeholders. And what does that look like? What does CTE look like virtually? Because core to who we are is hands-on. How do we make sure that our students are not missing out on that exceptional experience that they get in career and technology education? So some of the support to be able to help our practitioners through this was making sure that we had a platform. If some school districts didn't have a platform to have a learning management system, how were they going to be able to provide this for their students? So we have a statewide learning management system that we opened the door for any educator. Primarily it was for CTE educators, but we opened that door. If there was an educator that needed to use that learning management system, we opened that door for them to be able to do it. Many of the one success story we had on that, as I said, we were closed from about March 12th to April the 6th with no learning taking place at that time, and distance ed could start on the 6th. So we had a group of our practical nursing instructors across all of our technology centers come together and figure out how am I going to be able to have those students not miss out on their hours and be able to still work towards their licensure because they can't go on clinical sites. So we had one of our instructors who had built some simulation, had already worked with our licensing board to see if that would be applicable for them to use. And that instructor during that short period of time was able to put that on the learning management system and open the door for all of our practical nursing programs to utilize that simulation so that the students were not being able to alleviate that concern of, I've been in this program for so long, I'm right at the end and now I can't finish. What am I going to do? So they came together and we helped to provide them support so that they could put that on the online platform. The students to be able to stay continually engaged, as well as making sure for those other things that are going on, whether it's a student that was funded through federal funds or worrying about their Pell funding or different things like that, making sure that we were providing that guidance and an opportunity for a student to engage and be able to move forward in their educational process. Try to alleviate some of those unknowns for our students because even today we still have some of those unknowns out there. And so we're trying to work to alleviate that. The conversation around virtual CTE and what that looks like, the simulations were great, an opportunity for us to have students and continue to engage in that piece. Some of the other ways that we are working to develop that virtual component, we do have, we just had our second or third virtual CTE conference. We had some this summer for our career tech student organizations to engage in. And one of the pieces that feedback we received from the ones we had this summer was, well, I didn't, we had those activities that we used to do together and those particular things. So we just had one of our fall virtual career tech student organizations. And so we mailed individual kits to all of the students. Some students are actually at a school, some of them are virtual. So it was a combination. So we mailed out kits to every student who had registered for that career tech student organization for BPA and DECA. And they got a kit. No matter where they were at, they were able to participate in all the activities that they were doing online, whether that be in their home or in their classroom. So what we have started to do, no, we haven't mailed knives to any of our students, but we have mailed, we did some experiments with teachers over the summer. We have teacher externships that we do, and we had those set for this summer, and everybody's like, well, I guess we have to cancel them because we can't go to business. Well, there's no fun in that. So we decided, nope, we're gonna have them all virtually. So we mailed kits out to the teachers. And so we had the teachers test out this concept of, what does this look like? We're going to teach pre-engineering, different things like that. And so the teachers not only were a part of the connecting with the companies and industries who were going through these kits, but it also provided them some tools that we could help them develop for their students, for those, even for their in-class students to utilize, and also those who are choosing to be virtual, so that they're not disconnected from the activities that all their other students are connected to. So trying to help bridge that gap. And so those are just a few examples of things that our teachers have worked on. We do have, Amy mentioned that correspondence with different groups. We originally, when this started with administrators, I had meetings every day. We did that for probably about 2 months. We did Zoom conferences every day. And then we went to 2 or 3 times a week to 2 times a week. We still meet once a week. We do the same thing with our teachers and our different professional groups. We meet as often as available. And most of the times that is, in the evening. or after their students are gone at 4, or some of them if they're early, that we can do that at 7 or before they start class. But just making sure that we're keeping that open dialogue and that they can share some of their trials and tribulations that they may have had in the day. And you know, as Dr. Self mentioned, we have exceptional educators, not only in Oklahoma, but across all the states, and being able to have them connect and learn what's working for them and how we can provide solutions, that's been key to the whole process. Some of the ways, one of the other questions, Dan, that you had sent my way was, what are some of the ways of how are we going to keep supporting this? What does it look like? The opportunity that we find when we talk to our instructors, when we talk to administrators and our business partners, is the option for hybrid, or the option for different delivery methods, is not going to go away. Some of them are finding it very beneficial for different things that they've always wanted to do, and maybe didn't have the resources, the infrastructure to do that, and now that door is wide open. And so what we find is expanding that digital footprint, not losing the core to be able to have that hands-on connection with industry, but it's going to look a little bit different. All of our reopen plans that are published out on the website, you can see they all offer different options for students. The way they're open may vary depending on what the situation is in their local community. But through all of that, from the state agency, is we want to be able to provide resources that support all of those different areas they're at. So we currently are in the process of developing virtual reality components that can be utilized. We have 3 curriculum areas that we're working across right now to develop those. And then that way, whether a student is in the classroom or whether they're conducting that at home, they would have an opportunity to engage in that curriculum at various levels, as well as virtual work-based learning. Work-based learning, as in Oklahoma, we do have an individualized career academic plan, and in that, work-based learning is a required component. So we want to make sure that students don't miss out on that opportunity. And so we are setting up virtual work-based learning opportunities they can engage in one-on-one. And then we also are engaging on a monthly basis. We are offering virtual Oklahoma Education Industry Partnership seminars. Last month, we offered one specifically on entrepreneur, where it connected business and industry with students. And so teachers can log their whole classroom into it, to where they can have that work-based learning experience. They get to tour the specific industry this month. Next week, it will be based on wind energy. And so they will take the tours with 2 specific training programs, as well as industries for wind industry. So we have launched those programs to make sure that students still have that opportunity to connect if they're not able to visit the company. So just making sure that we are continuing to add opportunities for teachers, that they're not out there alone trying to create solutions, and learning from other states, looking at things that others are doing out there. Are there ways that we can partner? Partnering with our higher ed institutions in specific areas where we can bring our labs together, 360 video, combining all those particular pieces, and then how do we make that available to our students? So those are some of the pieces that we worked on to support across, and it does change on a regular basis, and as different opportunities arise, we just work to find various solutions, because one thing has been definite: one size will not fit all in this scenario, and making sure that we're providing those resources for educators to have the confidence in their delivery, because it may be a different environment that they haven't delivered in before. And so how do we provide them the best professional development for our educators? And we did launch a statewide learning management system just for our educators, so that we can provide tips and tricks out there, whether they're using Canvas, Google, all the various vendors out there that I did not mention, but those 2. We are not proprietary to any one vendor, but an opportunity for them to connect and be able to have conversations with colleagues about how they're using it and capture those best practices. So those are some of the areas, and I look forward to any questions that may be out there and learning from those that are participating today. So thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Dr. Mack. And I really thought some of the things that you said were really enlightening. I love the idea of sending the kits out to the teachers and having them test things out first, and making sure that it would work for them before they try to make it work for their students. I thought that's not something that I probably would have thought of, but I think that's a really fascinating idea. I also love that you say that one size does not fit all. What works for one school or one technical center may not work for another. So that's definitely a big takeaway there. We do have some questions in the Q&A box, and I'll get to those in a second. But I want to first ask a question to the group of you. Dr. Mack, you said something specifically about some opportunities that might have arisen from COVID. And, I think that the big mindset is that it's really easy to fall into this trap that COVID has been such a detriment for our education system. But I do think it's provided a lot of opportunities for our CTE system as well. So my question for the three of you, first and foremost, is what opportunities have you seen come from COVID as a disruptor? What have you seen that has changed the CTE system for the better?
Since I mentioned the opportunity one, I'll answer that question first, Dan. What I see in the opportunity, and because in career and technology education, business and industry is who we work directly with on a daily basis for our students to make sure we're providing the best educational opportunity we can. And during this time period, trying to find quality workforce, being able to find individuals for business and industry as they have faced various things with their employees, whether it's finding work or some not being able to be at work, career and technology education is a solution for that. Being able to provide various training in a very timely manner is one of the opportunities that we have found very definitely here in Oklahoma, is as they're looking to their workforce and having training programs available as individuals or unemployment. We look at those numbers, being able to fill that gap as we look at that. And then also individuals more open to the conversation about providing education in multiple ways, and that it's being able to move that forward. So those are just a few of the opportunities, and that door's wide open. And as we look at moving forward in the pandemic and how do we make the best of it, I truly believe career and technology education provides answers for business and industry to be able to get that qualified workforce.
Amy, Dr. Self, would you like to speak to any of the opportunities that COVID's provided?
I think kind of going along the train of thought of learning how to, adapting to remote learning and teaching for the workforce, for myself, for my team, for our teachers, I think this has opened up a channel of communication that didn't exist before. I can honestly say we are all feeling so much more connected now than we had before. I know you and I had discussed just the opportunities to participate in meetings like this is huge. And with travel restrictions, even prior to COVID, due to financial situations, et cetera, teachers, administrators weren't always able to come together. And now we have this technology that allows us to have meetings. To Marcie's point, you can have meetings daily, you can have meetings weekly, and not that you want to overtax anybody with too many meetings, but that level of connectedness is so much greater, I think. That if I'm going to find a silver lining in COVID, it's that it's brought us maybe a bit closer together with our field, with our partners, and that to me is a huge positive.
And I would just add to that, I think the opportunity to collaborate and work across Amy and Dr. Mack both have talked about working across states, and that's what we've been doing in this research project. And I'll go way out there and speak for all of higher ed, which I probably shouldn't, but I will say that most of us, at least in the CTE field, we want to do research that's meaningful. All of us want to have an impact on our classrooms and teachers. We came from that world. We're just in a little bit different world right now, and we really do want to have an impact. And what was heartening to many of us, and I think some of my Oklahoma respondents were afraid that it was an assignment in class, because they immediately responded and then sent me an email. I did the survey, and I'm going, you're not supposed to tell me you've done the survey, but that's okay. But I think all of us commented about that, the reconnection that we felt with the teachers just from the survey. And I'll speak for those that are on that second slide, Dan. We can share all of our contact information, and some of those people are obviously in different states besides mine. We truly do want to be a partner in CTE. We consider ourselves to be partners. And so we want to do research that's going to help you. So communicating with us in higher ed, I think is really important in keeping us informed and in the loop. I'm fortunate in Oklahoma because I'm on listservs for several different divisions within Dr. Mack's house. And so that helps me keep up with what the teachers are hearing and what they're saying. And that's really helpful to us as we work in higher education.
Great. And I think all of those things that all of you shared are, going to be things that carry on post-COVID, hopefully, and, continue to allow for some of that collaboration and some of that open sharing. And, the technology is only going to continue to grow. There's some questions in the Q&A. The first is specifically geared for Dr. Self. From the data collection, was there any response of how post-secondary or secondary kind of aligned with the support of students to be successful towards transitioning from high school to post-secondary, or did you see any of that information there?
We have it. It's in our metadata, but we asked, and I didn't go into all of that today, but I'll send that to you, Dan, a survey in a Word format, so one can look at it. But we asked them what grades they taught, whether they taught secondary and post-secondary. So more to come on that question, because we've got the data, we just haven't gotten that far with it yet. And
for Amy and Marcie, I'm also curious kind of what the difference was between your guidance for secondary versus post-secondary. Was there a lot of difference between the guidance there, or was it similar?
So in New York State, I say unfortunately, but it's changing. Secondary and post-secondary are very siloed in our department. So post-secondary CTE answers to a different deputy commissioner. They have different leadership. They have different goals, et cetera. So I did see the question, and the discussions that my team and I were part of were just the secondary. They did a separate set of regional meetings for post-secondary, but I've formed a team that brings together the post-secondary and the secondary, as well as stakeholders from the field, and moving forward in 2021, and I hate that seems so far off, and I know it's like tomorrow, is to start those discussions, to start seeing some of that alignment. But at the time that this was put together, I mean, nobody knew which end was up, and it was just a matter of, my goodness, can we get, we had on each of our regional calls about 400 participants on each call. So if we had thrown post-secondary into that mix, although I know there were some folks that kind of crossed over, I don't know how we would have gotten through the calls, honestly, but we will start moving towards, merging that information and that data together.
So we had the opportunity to work with post-secondary and secondary. Specifically to our secondary, we do that in conjunction with the State Department of Education. So in the outline of that, it was critical to make sure that the guidance that we were providing for our CTE secondary students was in alignment with the State Department of Education. We could provide some more detail after May 15th, after the school year was over. Then for our secondary students, we updated that guidance to align with what we were doing as well for our post-secondary. students. So there for a while, we have both audiences at the table at the same time, but we did make sure that we were in alignment with our other agencies in doing that.
Wonderful. I do see one more question and this will probably be our final question for today. For rural areas and communities lacking internet connection, were there organizations that you found that helped provide some of those resources, or how did you overcome some of those technological barriers that some of your communities might have faced?
So for some of our rural areas that we have here in Oklahoma, we had the opportunity when it first came out. Our schools were very creative, and they put Wi-Fi on some of the school buses and parked them in various locations so that individuals could utilize those as a hotspot for curriculum until they could work with local internet providers. And they did surveys during that same time period. They did surveys of their students. Phone call, text message, different things like that to ask them about their connectivity. Would they have access? Some of them worked with various locations to make sure that they could open spots for individuals if they didn't have a computer. And then once they finished with the survey part, they put specific locations for pickup. If someone did not have a laptop, Chromebook, or anything along that line, they could check one of those out and a hotspot. And so that was how some of our technology centers and programs were able to bridge that divide. And then we also have specifically a Learn Anywhere. We have a nonprofit that is sponsoring that, and it is supported through the CARES dollars. The governor dedicated specific funds for it that individuals can apply for anywhere in the state, as well as some of our service providers in specific areas. And we have also utilized the USDA Rural Economic Development grants during this time period to get some of those areas stood up and connected to various locations.
Yeah, I would say that we've pretty much done everything very similarly in New York, and I would say that I know based on our last Board of Regents meeting that our Board of Regents is working with the legislature and the governor's office to start mapping out plans to provide more broadband up, particularly in our North Country region where you don't even have cell service up in some parts of our state. So I know that that's ongoing work here in New York.
Wonderful. Well, it sounds like everyone is doing great things, and I commend you all for the work that you've done and are continuing to do. I want to thank everyone for their time today and appreciate all of your hard work, your expertise. Maryjo, Amy, Marcie, thank you. To the rest of you, thank you for joining today's Advance CTE webinar. As mentioned, a recording of this call will be posted to the Advance CTE website and our YouTube channel for your reference, as well as some contact information for our panelists if you would like to follow up with them. And of course, registration is open for our next webinar, which is on November 10th at 3 p.m. Eastern, called Federal Leadership and Advanced CTE Leaders and Partners, which will be a really exciting celebration of 100 years of Advanced CTE. Woo! We will be bringing together a panel with Assistant Secretary Scott Stump and the previous 4 other Assistant Secretaries of OCTAE. Really exciting, and we'll hope that you join us for that. A link to that registration is actually now in the chat now. Finally, after leaving this meeting, please complete the quick evaluation that'll pop up in your web browser. We really want to make sure that this series is meeting your needs. Once again, thank you all for your support of Advanced CTE and the field of CTE. Have a wonderful afternoon, and we hope you join us again. Bye-bye.